Welcome to Major Antonio's presentation of Hitler's 4 Reasons for War from the Wehrmacht War Diary. On August 22, 1939, Hitler summoned his top military commanders to the Berghof, his residency in the Bavarian Alps, to brief them about his decision to invade Poland. The following is a translation of the entry in the War Diary of the Wehrmacht High Command made on this occasion.
Speech by the Führer at the Berghof on August 22, 1939. On August 22, 1939 at 12 noon, the Führer explained the reasons for his decision to go to war against Poland to the commanders-in-chief, senior commanders and chiefs of general staff of the 3 branches of the Wehrmacht gathered at the Berghof in a speech lasting several hours. It had been clear for a long time that sooner or later there would have to be a confrontation with Poland. He made the decision to act in the spring after Poland's sharp rejection of Germany's wishes on the Danzig and corridor issues. There are important reasons for not postponing the inevitable confrontation to a perhaps even less favorable time. First, never again will a German statesman be a representative of the entire German people like he was. This gives him an authority that no one in Germany has ever had before. The only guarantee of Italian loyalty to the alliance was the Duce's strong-nerved personality, while one could not at all rely on the court, which was fundamentally opposed to Mussolini. Only benevolent neutrality could be expected from Spain, and only as long as Franco was at the top. Second, there were no personalities of stature on the other side. The decision to go to war is much more difficult for our opponents than it is for us, since they would risk a lot and gain little. For us, it is relatively easy because we have nothing to lose and no other option. Because our economic situation is so difficult that we can only hold out for a few more years. Field Marshal Göring could confirm this. Third, the general situation is favorable for us. The Mediterranean region has been in a state of constant tension since the Abyssinian War. In the Middle East, the events in Palestine had alarmed the entire Mohammedan world. In East Asia, the tension caused by the Japanese-Chinese conflict binds strong Anglo-Saxon forces. For Great Britain as well as for France, the consequences of the World War became increasingly noticeable. Ireland has almost completely separated itself from the British Empire. South Africa is striving for ever greater independence. The difficulties for England were growing in India as well as in the Middle East. Great Britain is facing a serious threat to many of its force fields. As far as France was concerned, it was already condemned to decline by its national development. Its corrupt domestic political situation would do the rest to weaken it. In addition, it is threatened by Italy in the Mediterranean. There has been a balance of power in the Balkans since Italy occupied Albania at Easter 1939. Yugoslavia could today be seen as a reliable friend of Germany, but it was weak and carried the seeds of decay as a result of its internal political conditions and its external vulnerability. Romania sees itself threatened by Hungary and Bulgaria. With its weak leadership, Turkey cannot be expected to have a strong policy. But it is doubtful whether these favorable conditions for us in the Balkans would still exist in 2 to 3 years. Fourth, finally, it is of utmost importance to test the instrument of the new German Wehrmacht within the acceptable framework of a limited conflict before a general reckoning with the victorious powers of the World War, which would lead to a serious world conflict. Proving the strength of the Wehrmacht would be of considerable importance for it and its position in public opinion. It was very difficult for him to decide on the earlier policy of understanding with Poland, which was initiated in 1934. England probably counteracted the mediation proposals he made to the Polish Foreign Minister Beck at the beginning of 1939 regarding future German-Polish relations and the settlement of the Danzig and corridor issues. The Polish response consisted of a partial mobilization and concentration of troops near Danzig. This had brought about an intolerable state of tension, the release of which should not have been left to our opponents if we did not want to forego giving the law of action. There have been enough English attempts to reach lazy compromises with obligations for Germany à la Versailles. Therefore, the moment is favorable for isolating Poland. Nevertheless, military action against Poland remains a risk, but one that we must take on with ruthless determination. Now, as last year and this spring, he is once again fully convinced that this venture will succeed. England and France had committed themselves to providing aid to Poland, but they were practically in no position to do so, and the treaties they had entered into had not yet been ratified. It seemed impossible to him that a British statesman would take the great risk of war given the very precarious world situation. This time, however, England was trying to avoid the mistake of early capitulation made in the fall of 1938. As far as France was concerned, given its weak vintage, it could not bear the great blood sacrifice of a long war. Both states only have two options to help Poland: by blockading Germany and by attacking in the west. The former was ineffective because Germany would counter it by advancing eastwards. The latter was psychologically inconceivable and also hopeless without violating Belgian-Dutch neutrality, which was by no means to be expected. A British-French attack on Italy is also highly unlikely. In the worst case, Germany could survive a long war, which England would always aim for, since its production output is significantly greater today than in 1918. A non-aggression treaty had just been concluded in Moscow with Soviet Russia, on which the Western powers had previously placed their hopes following the possible defeat of Poland by Germany. The suggestion for this came from Soviet Russia. He had been convinced for a long time that Stalin would not accept any English offer. Because Stalin had no interest in preserving Poland and knew full well that if there were a war between Germany and Soviet Russia, his regime would be over, regardless of whether he won or lost. The German-Russian non-aggression pact has now taken the card out of the hands of the Western powers, which will be of great psychological importance for their decision. For Germany, the treaty not only meant a tremendous economic strengthening, but also a complete reversal of its foreign policy. It marked the beginning of the destruction of England's supremacy. After he had made the political preparations, the path was now clear for the soldier. After an hour-long lunch break, the Führer continued his speech at 3 p.m. as follows. The further behavior of England and France cannot, of course, be predicted with certainty. Ruthless determination is required on our part. An appropriate attitude in public is a duty for every individual. More than ever, the example of superiors is important. The German people, who are still suffering from the psychological after-effects of the greatest crisis in their history, must overcome this through sacrifice and stress. It was not the machines but the people who led the fight. The psychological factors were the deciding factor. The final victory can only be achieved through unshakable fortitude, as Frederick the Great showed. Such an attitude brings success. It was the task of the Wehrmacht to completely destroy the Polish armed forces, even if fighting broke out in the West. The material should not be spared, and ammunition should not be spared. Propaganda measures would trigger the war through Polish provocation. More or less credibility is not important. It's not about being right, it's about winning. Therefore, there should be no pity, no human emotion. He is committed to the German people, who cannot live in the current space. 80 million people must get their rights and their existence must be secured. During operations, speed in reaching a decision is of the utmost importance. The two attack wedges would have to advance quickly to the Vistula and the Narew. The leadership must quickly adapt to new situations, immediately destroy new Polish force formations, and wear down the enemy by using the air force. Our technical superiority will destroy the Poles' nerves. Furthermore, he relies firmly on the German soldiers. His belief in their bravery and ability is unshakable. After the defeat of Poland, a new German border would be drawn in the east, but this would not be identical to the military goals. It is important to ensure that the German people have a tolerable living space. He was thinking about expanding the Reich's territory with neutralized states upstream, possibly a Polish protectorate. He was firmly convinced that the new German Wehrmacht would be able to cope with all the challenges it would face. He would yet order the start of the fight.
Ten days later, the Wehrmacht had invaded Poland and the Second World War in Europe had begun. On September 23 already, the Wehrmacht High Command announced victory in the East, in a summary report about the campaign which we've also translated for you. Stay tuned for this and many other fascinating documents on Major Antonio's Military History channel. Subscribe to us. Thank you very much, and so long.